Hi folks, this is the Fighting Nerd and his co-host, Jolly Roger. The CW DC Comics based television shows are better than any of the recent DC Comics movies. We're talking post Christian Bale Batman and on when it comes to a time frame on the movies. And I think there were a lot of reasons for this. This video was originally just going to be a review of the recent crossover between Supergirl, Arrow, Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. But I couldn't really do a proper review without spoilers, and there are probably a lot of people that haven't seen it yet. But I was really impressed with it. And the reason was that it had a very serious storyline. You can't really deal with Nazis and not be at least a little bit serious. It had a lot of characters coming together, and the interactions handled very well. And even though there was enough drama to keep you very invested in the story, there was also enough humor so you weren't depressed at the end of each episode. Now, contrasted with the recent movies, those were depressing movies, with the exception of Wonder Woman. They learned a lesson from the disasters that were Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. And I'll let you have a little emotional breathing room in Wonder Woman. But it still had a lot of deficiency when it came to story. And I did a review on Wonder Woman, and I talked about how the story seemed to stop so they could use these massive CGI shots to kind of distract you from the fact that the story wasn't well developed. Now, and I think that those movies, because they were meant from the get-go to be blockbusters, the movie makers got so fixated on being a blockbuster that they didn't really worry too much about making a good movie. They wanted to make a blockbuster movie. So what we got is some pretty awful CGI, or the overuse of CGI, and some characters that you didn't really care about. You get a little bit emotionally invested in Batman in these pictures, in these films, because he's aging at this point. He knows he's mortal, and he is even more confronted with his mortality because he doesn't, with his own mortality. Okay, let's do that again. He is more fixated on his own mortality because he is among these people who all have superpowers when he doesn't. But he's the only character you really gravitate to, with the possible exception of Wonder Woman in her own movie, because she's losing that innocence after leaving Themyscira. But you don't get that later on in Justice League. From what I've seen, full disclosure, I haven't seen Justice League yet. But there's enough information out there that I think that they made those same mistakes of relying on CGI to distract from the poor script. On the other end of things, you have the CW DC based shows that don't have a huge effects budget, and they have to stretch that budget out over, I think, 22 episodes each. So they have to tell stories, and they have to get you invested in the characters. And they have the advantage over the films is that they do have 22 episodes, maybe even several seasons, in order to do that with the characters. And this crossover event was just that. I have a feeling that when the writers were all getting together to do the scripts for these shows, they were saying we can have so much fun with the character interactions here. With the different teams and the different personalities coming to work together and annoying each other and forming friendships and whatnot. And because if you watched even one of these shows, you've seen enough of the other characters to have a sense of who they are and anticipate a little bit how they'll all react with each other. And they took the time to tell the story of how these characters know each other, and it's a complex web, which I always love. I always love big casts with good writing and fantastic character interaction. That's what I try to achieve in the novels that I write. And that's where I think that the DC shows on the CW excel. They can stand on their own. They stand on their own because they have their own contained ensemble casts that work well together. But they can also bring them together for these crossovers and really get character dynamics there. You can believe these people are friends. You want to see more of those friendships, right? And in this crossover, you can really see how they came together as one big team. And I don't want to spoil anybody, but they do suffer a fatality amongst the cast, or one of the casts. And it affects all of them, even the characters that didn't know the character that dies well, because they had been fighting together through a few episodes. The loss of a comrade in combat affects them all, and it's handled very well. And even though you have that death and the consequences of just the line of work of being this hero, and all the sacrifices that entails, and in some cases, meeting evil versions of yourself, right? They deal with that trauma and they deal with that emotional conflict, but there's enough humor and enough positive character interaction that you feel good after watching the show, instead of looking for a Prozac the size of a golf ball like I did, like I wanted to do when I got done watching Man of Steel. And I think the television shows understand that they are doing a superhero show. Can a superhero character be well developed? Absolutely. Can he have a tragic past that influences characters? His character? Yes. But they don't have to let those flaws and that emotional damage shape that character or define that character. They can shape the character but not define the character. And what I mean by that is you take the TV version of Oliver Queen and Green Arrow. The first few seasons, you were always flashing back to his time on the deserted island where he was forced to become a champion archer and a world-class warrior in order to survive. And that's great. You see how he was shaped from the playboy that got stranded on the island to come back. But what defined him wasn't all the trauma and horrors that he experienced, which were considerable. What defined him was his mission in life to go back and fulfill his father's work, his father's life, and save his city. Right? And all of the things he went through, all of the training he did, all of the pain he endured was made possible by this mission in life to get back home and save his city. That's what defined him. His mission, his purpose, and his determination defines the Oliver Queen character. Not all the emotional trauma. Is it part of him? Sure. But it doesn't define him. And that is a thread that goes through the entire group of series on the CW in the DC universe. Conversely, in the movies, in Man of Steel, you have the whole Kryptonian invasion thing. And this soul searching over, well, am I going to be Superman, am I going to be Clark? And really just really overly mushy ruminating over his mommy issues and his daddy issues. I want that. I'll turn on afternoon TV and watch some soap operas. Right? He's Superman. Right? So Superman knows what is right because he was raised by good people. Right? He knows what he's right. He's not afraid to fight for it. Right? What we got in Man of Steel was this brooding, self-doubting, almost self-loathing character. Right? And if it wasn't for the big S on his chest, you'd swear you were watching a movie about anybody other than Superman. Now, I understand that Zack Snyder didn't even like the Superman character. So why a studio would allow him to take gazillions of dollars to make a movie about Superman, I don't know. But it's clear that he doesn't understand the superhero movie. Right? You can have a very developed character, but you have to remember the character is a hero, and you have to remember that a superhero movie is about escapism. You're not going to a superhero movie to learn about the real world or to confront your own emotional demons or anything like that. Now, as I said, you can have good solid drama, good solid storytelling in a superhero movie. But a superhero movie is about escapism. It can be a good allegory for real life. But it can't afford to take itself as an engine for social change. It can happen with a superhero movie. It can become an engine for social change. But if you go out and try to write a movie or write a superhero story like that, it is almost certainly going to fail. So the CW movies, the CW TV shows understand that people want to plop down in front of a television show and for an hour or two just get lost in the show. Just get lost in this world, right? That has its own rules and its own, in the writer's term, continuity, right? You jump into something like that. It has its own rules and its own mythology. And you don't have to worry about what you're going to have to do tomorrow. Or at least you're not going to worry about it as much. If you went to Superman versus Batman or Man of Steel, right? And from what I understand, Justice League to a certain degree, you plop down your ridiculously overpriced money for your ridiculously overpriced ticket, and you get a movie that seems determined to make you feel badly. Who wants to pay for that? If you want to deal with some emotional issues, you can do that in just about any workspace in America. And that's also where the Marvel Cinematic Universe always beats the DC stuff, because they understand. You see Guardians of the Galaxy to escape, to laugh. And I'm not a big fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I like the Avengers much better. But any of the Marvel movies, you go to escape, to laugh. Yeah, it tells a good story. Maybe not the most original story, but they tell the basic story well. Right? You get good character interaction, good performances, but you turn the worrying part of your brain off for an hour or two. Right? And you're not involved in all the emotional demons that the characters on the screen might have. They have them. Captain America, for instance, seems to be kind of a troubled character, and you know, Tony Stark is dealing with a lot of guilt. It's there. You can see it. It helps bring the characters to life, but they don't beat you over the head with it. DC beats you over the head with all the psychological trauma and emotional upheaval, because I think they seem not to want to do a superhero movie. They don't get somebody to go out that likes a superhero movie, that likes science fiction in general. They pick a director that wants to make, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and or some other, avant-garde, hard-hitting movie that's going to be accepted by the pseudo-intellectuals of the world. And then they scratch their head when they've given somebody like that $1 gazillion to make a superhero movie. And they get an emo nightmare. And DC, if they're going to continue to make these movies, had better get with the program on that. Nobody sits down to watch a movie or watch a television show and wants to be feeling worse at the end of that show than they felt at the beginning of the show. So that's why the CW DC TV shows are so much better than any of the movies that they make. Is they understand what they're doing. They understand the genre that they're living in, and they understand they understand the genre they're working in, and they understand why people watch the shows. And also, since they have more time to tell a story, and they don't have a huge special effects budget, the merits of the show are in the storytelling and in the characters. And they don't try to do hand wave you and try to distract you from the fact that there is no story and no characterization with a bunch of CGI. There's going to be a Titans or a Teen Titans television show, and I guess a Hawk and Dove television show in the works to add to this universe. And so if they keep this up, you're going to have, and these shows are successful and they're as good as the others, what you're going to have is the CW being the DC Comics network. And maybe DC ought to just concentrate on the television shows. I don't want to put any more money into the television shows, because if they do that, then they're going to get CGI, and the CGI will ruin everything. They'll have a whole bunch of CGI in it because they have the money for it, and it will ruin the shows, because it's my contention that CGI is ruining the sci-fi genre and all of its subgenres. So that's it. I'm getting a little long on this video here. But those are my thoughts. The television shows that DC are putting out are much better than their films, because they have more time for characters and story, and they don't have the money for a lot of CGI to distract from the fact to take away from story and character. That's my 2 cents. This is the Fighting Nerd, bidding you all a good night. Remember, words make history.